great to see you guys here. My name's Anisha, so I help run go-to-market operations here at Scale. So what we do as a team is kind of what this slide, we like to describe it as we help our portfolio build and optimize hyper-growth go-to-market machines. We use the word machine very intentionally because the idea is you're creating this like repeatable process and you always know what you're going to get. And we do that through a couple of different ways. So one of them is events such as today, right, where we have really great people like Camille come share what they're seeing in the world. We have this really awesome content library where we have one-stop shop templates that you can just pick up and repurpose. And then we have a really great set of advisors across sales, marketing, SDR, the whole go-to-market lifecycle. So really excited to have you here, Camille. I'll let you maybe quickly introduce yourself and then we can jump right in.
Yeah, thanks, Anisha. So yeah, a little background on me. Started off my career in advertising, kind of expanded to marketing, and then stumbled into, I think as most people do, like into tech and the startup world, and really enjoy it. So I'm the director of content community over at PeerSignal. For anyone who doesn't know, PureSignal is it's basically the research arm of KeyPlay, which is our SaaS product that focuses on account selection and data for companies. And essentially, like, we started with PureSignal and not the SaaS product. So we started with like the research and sort of content arm first as kind of like the media company play. Basically to study go-to-market. So the stuff that you guys are interested in, we're selfishly interested in as a SaaS company ourselves, to be able to study go-to-market and to study essentially what's working and why companies are growing right now.
Cool.
And as a lot of you know, that starts with PLG. So Anisha, sorry, I cut you off a little bit.
No, you're good. I was just going to say, because I completely forgot to mention, please feel free to hop in on the chat or the Q&A. We encourage questions and I'll be monitoring it. So Camille, I'll jump in with questions as people throw them in. But I was actually going to start off with a super quick question for you, which is, I know we've called this webinar like 5 growth strategies defining B2B success. So I wanted to just start by, I know you guys do a lot of research in the space, so I'm curious what trends you're seeing in the market right now, and if we can maybe start with some of that.
Yeah, that's a good call. Yeah, I'd love to hear kind of what everyone's seeing, and we can be flexible and tailor to any questions that come through as we go as well. But if not, we can also just roll forward, and if we have questions along the way, I'm sure we will. So I'm happy to kind of like pause and talk through some of that.
I don't see anyone in the chat right now, so let's keep going, and then we'll they come in.
Yeah, let's roll forward. All right. So before your eyes start like glazing over, I know Prodct-Led, comes up a lot. PLG is the way. So I'm gonna just quickly go over the why behind it, though, whether or not you're bought into it or not bought into it. This is kind of what we're seeing, like when we analyze the data. So 33% of all buyers desire a seller-free sales experience, right? I think this is actually even a little bit higher, just because when you are buying a product, everyone wants a research phase, right? Everyone just wants that time to be able to absorb and compare competitors and look around and try the product, right? And so we definitely do want sellers at some point, right? We want to have like that concierge one-on-one, but on our own timetable is what it's becoming. And then 50% of our B2B index. So through PureSignal, we have just curated a ton of companies within B2B. And then we've also looked at and vetted a bunch of those companies as PLG to kind of be able to compare the two. So 50% of our B2B index has a free trial or a free plan. So freemium, or some sort of free trial. 33% of the B2B index is PLG. So essentially like a third, and we have a pretty good sample size, a third of B2B companies at this, SaaS companies at this stage are considered PLG. They have some sort of free motion or free-ish motion. And then if you look at the Cloud 100, which is like often seen as, the best of SaaS, right? The best of B2B SaaS, that doubles, right? So like 66% of the Cloud 100 or 66 of those companies are PLG. So essentially it's becoming table stakes to do PLG at all, to have some sort of free offering. Your competitors are doing it. And it's just easier to get people in when the barrier of entry is that low. And then, this is when we were breaking down tech layoffs and looking at the PLG Rising 40. So these were all voted in the Rising 40 from the tech community of, I think, about 400 people voted in. But this is what we're seeing in terms of the hiring growth, from the average SaaS to like the Rising 40. So essentially, like, the growth seems to be stronger in PLG is what you should get from this slide, especially in like the go-to-market motions. Like, they're more aggressively hiring for marketing and sales. They're seeing more positive headcount growth. Like, essentially, they're still growing despite what's happening right now in 2023. And then the kind of misnomer that I want to clear up here is that I think we think about PLG or product-led growth as an acquisition strategy. Like, it's just a way to bring people in, right? To kind of like get as many people signed up, like growth at all costs for your product. But really it's a go-to-market strategy, and it helps with retention and it helps with monetization. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But this kind of speaks to how it helps, or how it can help with monetization. So we kind of think about product-led and sales-led as, two totally separate things. But most companies that we've found, especially ones that have scaled, like the unicorns of the world, right? They've found a way to bridge, and often they're doing both at the same time. And so typically they'll kind of use product-led to set up that demand engine to get people in, and then sales as kind of a way to capture some of that. So in the meantime, they'll have to kind of like segment and pull out the accounts that are worth that one-on-one touch. And so that's a big part of this is a tool that kind of helps sort some of those leads and some of the revenue opportunities there. But really, a lot of this is becoming product-led sales rather than just product-led versus sales-led. And so it doesn't have to be one or the other, is the point there. And then the other problem, I think, or challenge that people run into is, okay, well, what if my product doesn't work for PLG? Like, I'm not a horizontal SaaS, right? Most SaaS companies aren't. And so to try and like compare yourself to like a Zapier or an Airtable or something like that is kind of a stretch. And so I think for those companies, especially ones with high ACV or with very custom offerings, custom plans, it's worth looking into PLG-ish, like, as we think about it. So PLG-ish, in that there's kind of like 5 core types of free offers that you can give someone. And I think it's free trial, it's free plan, and then there's a blend of that, which is called the reverse trial. And then there's open source, so you can create like open source tools. You can create free tools. So think about what HubSpot did early days, or Ahrefs did, or Moz, about how they'd have these free, website checkers, right? Or like SEO checkers, right? So you can kind of show off what you do with no gate, essentially. And those are kind of different free offerings to think about if you can't do a freemium plan. Other high leverage PLG levers, because I think a big question for people is just like, well, where do I start with this, right? Like, what's a low hanging fruit kind of like way for me to start? And I think some things that Paddle, which specializes in pricing for SaaS companies, one thing that they found was single sign-on. So that's like an easy way to get people signed on, to lower the barrier of entry for them to try your product, right? And then there's also integrations, leaning into partnerships. So API plays, dedicated support, integrations. Like these are all things that are basically high value, high price, and some good tactics to kind of start with here. Okay, so within PLG, we also look at, okay, what are specific go-to-market motions that PLG companies are doing at a high rate? And so across the Cloud 100, across the PLG 40, across like the PLG companies that are doing really well, or really just SaaS companies that are doing well, because there's traditional SaaS companies that do this really well. Communities is a big theme. So so communities is one that I want to touch on here. Again, like by the numbers, and this is from our research at PeerSignal, 40% of B2B SaaS companies have a community of some sort. And then again, if you look at the PLG cohort within there, it goes up to 55%. 58% of the Cloud 100. So again, like the companies that you want to be like, have some sort of brand community. And then if you compare that to just the average B2B company, it goes down to 37%. And then 26%, so about a quarter of the Cloud 100s were actively hiring for community. What was interesting about that is it was in the height of the tech layoffs when we did that report. So this was like around October, November time that we were running this, and they were still hiring for something that a lot of people saw as a nice to have during this time. A lot of Cloud 100s were thinking about it as a must have. Okay, so the Rising 40 for PLG, which is like a recent thing that we did just last month, so that data is pretty fresh. We saw that they were more likely to build community at 3.5 times more likely, basically, to build community than sort of your average SaaS company. And then 71% of the PLG Rising 40 have a community of some sort. If you compare that to SaaS, it's much lower. And then PLG Rising 40 has an average of 155 LinkedIn followers per employee. If you compare that to just the overall PLG index, or even compare that to greater SaaS, like that number goes way down. It's basically double for like the top PLG companies. Is they're essentially, what all this means is that they're better at growing an audience, and they're better at community. And so we'll dig into a little bit why here, but this is just more along those lines of, this is one of the bigger differences between PLG and B2B, is how good they are at community. Same thing with Cloud 100s. And I wanted to touch on this because I think it's just like, what is community right now? I think it's just like a buzzword that's kind of thrown around. But back in the day, when you think about like Salesforce and Marketo, I would argue that one of the things that they did the best was community, but they did it in a different way that's kind of become commonplace and isn't necessarily a strategic advantage at this point. So, you know, you can still do swag, you can do conferences, you can do certifications and like universities, but at a certain stage, everybody does that, right? And everybody has a guest blog, and those plays have become a little bit more saturated. And then if you look at Community 2.0, I think of like the Figmas and the Notions, and some things that they did different were online spaces, like having their own Slack community, having those be invite only, a little bit more curated, a little bit like smaller and more intimate. And then they've like started to really own social and figure that out in a way that other SaaS companies haven't. And then the last thing that's been key, I think, is templates, and Notion is a great example of this. And that kind of brings us into this sort of like next go-to-market strategy that seems to be just a common theme. Like every time that we run these go-to-market analyses and research, like these themes constantly come up: community, templates, and then we'll get into the other ones. Yeah, from Nate, Notion's Reddit page is rad. Yeah, Notion is sort of the GOAT in a lot of just community in general. So they've done a really nice job at social. They've complemented their community with in-person events, like small, intimate events, like all over the country. So in person, And then they also did an invite only Slack community to start, to really like curate and make sure that it was, that they were going for quality, like over quantity at the beginning. All right, so templates, why templates? A fourth of PLG companies or PLG startups have a template library. When I looked at Okta's 10 fastest growing apps from last year, 7 of those had templates. And then really like it's go-to-market strategy, and that helps acquisition, it helps retention, and it helps with like monetization as well. So it's not just, again, it's not just the acquisition part. It's a way for people to basically just know how to get started in their product and see the value faster, which I think is really what PLG means to its core, is like helping people see the value faster. All right, so this is like a graphic that we put together and how we think about the levels of templates. So your baseline template is kind of what, you know, Gong, Lattice, HubSpot did with the durable the durable PDFs, right? Where it's like a guide, and it might be like a checklist of some sort, but it's typically in the format of a PDF. And then you can have a more interactive version of that, like ClickUp and Canva did, where you can have those templates directly in the product. So again, you like easily just understand how to get started. And then the upper echelon of templates is some combination of partner and community led, right? So we think of tier number 3 as partner, and Zapier is a great example of this, is how they partnered with different brands to be able to give more exposure to their product and have people understand how to use it, how it plugs in. And then the top 2 are just community contributed. So figuring out ways to incentivize the community to create templates within or on top of your product. And then again, Notion mentioned them as the GOAT. I'll mention them again here because they have a marketplace of these templates that some are partner, right? Like some might be made by something like Zapier, might contribute a Notion template. But then there's also creators that contribute these, and some of these you have to pay for, right? So like they're paying people, they're helping people make money by building a product on top of their product, if you think about it that way. So in B2B, especially in B2B SaaS, like the goal is to make people better at their jobs and to help people make money, right? And so if you can do both of those things, help people with their side hustle and their full-time job, it's going to be pretty successful. So the next thing here is account-based go-to-market. So ultimately, I liked this quote from Bilal of sales is 50% list building, maybe even more. So if you don't understand your ICP, if you don't know where to get started on a list, like that can be problematic because you haven't figured out the who. And so it's going to be hard to figure out the how and how to scale if you don't know who you're talking to. So when I think about order of operations, think about identifying your ICP, essentially the where you win. And then you can go to step number 2 of creating the repeatable acquisition playbook, and that's the how you win. And then you can scale it. I see a lot of people like trying to put step number 3 first. Anisha and I talked about this a bit, and maybe we can pause here and get Anisha in to talk about what you're seeing. But we talked about how everyone's eager to scale. Like everyone wants to jump at these steps and just go right into, okay, how do we get more? How do we 10x, right? Like 10x is always comes up. But you can't scale a system that you don't have, right? And so identifying the who and then identifying how you're going to scale it is that system portion. So yeah, Anisha, like any thoughts on this just from your portfolio companies and from just being in the market?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. That's what we're seeing, what we're hearing, right? Is everyone's like, we want to be 20x what we are right now. And then you start at the ICP and you're like, great, what's your ICP? Do you have it figured out? And everyone says yes. And then you ask them what their ICP is. And it's this pie in the sky, super broad thing. And you're like, well, is that really your ICP? I don't know, right? And very often it's not just where they're winning, which is, you're going to get into it, so I won't steal from you, but a lot of times it's also this concept of manifestation, right? Where they come up with this ICP and then you see how many accounts they actually have that fit that, and it's not really anything. So it's an interesting concept where I don't think people follow that order as much as we would like them to.
Yeah, I loved how you said that yesterday. Of so many startups and founders are wanting to manifest their ICP. They're like, I really want to be here. Like I want to be up market, or I want to sell to this niche because they're really hot right now and they have budget. But then it's a matter of do you properly answer that need for that niche. And so I like what Florin said here of founders and sales leaders have no idea who their ideal customer profile is. And I jotted down like a few places to start, right? Growth signals, tech signals, like that'll tell you the context of where they're at, what their day-to-day looks like, and then industry, vertical, size, stage. Like that's a good starting place. But I'm going to skip this one. What your audience is probably not is computer software. So yeah, I think when I hear someone say their ICP is marketing or like marketers, sales, HR, or maybe it's just SaaS companies, right? Like Anisha and I were talking about this a lot yesterday. A lot of companies are like, I sell to SaaS companies, but that's like not quite enough. So it's digging into, okay, what audience is it? Is it B2B? Is it B2C? What are the primary categories? Like, yes, it's probably SaaS, but within SaaS, there's fintech, right? Like there's entertainment, there's consumer apps. Like those are going to be very different than like a B2B app. And then looking at the secondary categories, right? So you'll have your primaries of like the types and the audience types. And then you'll have, okay, probably some sort of vertical within there, like something as specific as online dating or health and wellness. So really getting that narrowed down and then finding the tools to be able to actually get to that audience is going to be key. So knowing your ICP turns out super important. And the last one I want to end on is once you know that, it's the how, right? Like how are we going to translate what we do well and what we deliver, bridging your need with the solution that we have. How are we going to say that in like an elevator pitch, right? Whether it's on your website or in your sales calls, in your outreach, like how can you distill down what you do? And we analyzed a little over 2,000 B2B SaaS websites. And essentially a key theme that I saw, especially among like successful PLG companies, like the names that you would recognize, they tend to follow this framework. So desire that you solve minus the seemingly unavoidable pain. And what that looks like is, ignore this source HBR at the bottom. This is sourced from PeerSignal, but yeah, if we look at Webflow, here's an example of it. The site you want minus or without the development time. And they're consistent with this messaging, like in their commercials, in all of their marketing, like it all flows like through this core belief. Fivetran, the most reliable pipelines that you'll never build. Loom on, meetings off. So in this instance, like they are almost creating a category in that they're saying like, we are the screen sharing, like screen capture tool for this, like we are this market. And then there's another way to do it where it doesn't have to, you don't exactly have to follow that format. You can just challenge the old way in the headline, like say, there's a better way to ask, help your audience think about it of like, oh yeah, there is probably a better way to ask, a better way to do forms. And then they use the subhead to like further explain. So you don't want to make a boring form and your audience will answer one. Then the solution is creating a type form instead and making everyone happy. So those are really like the 5 core themes that we've seen like over and over again in the past like 6 to 7 months of go-to-market research. Beyond that, probably closer to a year. And so if you guys like want to dig further into this research, it's all free. Like I said, our research arm, PureSignal, is completely free, and where we curate a lot of this company data and indexes. We have one for PLG, we have one for B2B SaaS. So if you just want to spy on your competitors or just get inspiration, we have a lot of screenshot libraries for you to just look through specific pages like home pages and pricing pages of your competitors. And then we also recently rolled out an AI index and a fintech index. So we have a lot of company data to look through and filter through, but then also like inspirational things like homepage screenshots as well. And then, like I said, this is what it looks like for PLG specifically. So we have the Rising 40 PLG in here. We have pricing pages, and then we have like this full index to look through to kind of see like the offers and content plays that different companies that you'd like to be are doing. So that is it for me. Was there anything that you wanted to go over, or maybe we can just go right to questions? What do you think, Anisha?
Yeah. Thank you, Camille. This was awesome. I would love if anyone has any questions, please feel free to throw it in the chat or the Q&A. We can stay on. I know we booked an hour for this, so if there is anything, feel free to drop it in there. Otherwise, Camille, I know we spent some time and we talked about, I know PLG was kind of the beginning of this conversation, right? But it is such a big topic in even our portfolio today, right? Where a lot of them just aren't sure where to get started, right? And they're like, oh, we're too custom, our product's too niche, we don't know what to do. And I know you had that slide about PLG-ish, right? But besides the offer, I'm curious what PLG companies do differently and what you're seeing, right? Is there anything about their marketing or their sales strategy that really differentiates it from what we're traditionally seeing?
Sorry, my dog started barking there at the end. Can you say the last question?
Yeah, of course. No, I'm just curious what you're seeing that PLG companies are doing that's different besides just the offer, right? And if there is more to it and anything different about their marketing and their sales strategy today.
Yeah. So going back to the like different types of free offers, so the PLG-ish, the sort of like 5 things are, there's the freemium. So there's what everyone's thinking about as PLG, right? There's the free trial, right? So which you think of as like the premium version of your product, but for a limited time, right? But with freemium, you think about a limited version of your product, but forever, right? So it's kind of opposites, right? And the best is when you can combine those two, right? Where you start people off on the best possible version of your product, like it's just unlimited. And then all of a sudden, you take some of that away, like after 14 days, right? It's like you can experience the whole thing, but then I'm going to pull it back, and then I'm going to be like, man, like I really liked that one feature. Like maybe I should upgrade. And that's kind of the idea behind it, is that sort of loss aversions. That's kind of like the why I think that strategy can work really well if you have successful onboarding, which I think a lot of this depends on, and things like templates, like within your product, right? Or just some sort of like workflow sequencing can like really help people get to that value faster, which again, I think is like the biggest principle behind the idea of PLG, is like, how can I help my customers or users like have more success faster? Like, how can I help them like get to that aha moment faster? And so those are kind of more of like the traditional plays. But the alternate stuff that's coming up is, I even think something like a community is sort of like a free offer of sorts, right? Where it's almost like the sounding board with other people. They can ask around about how they like the product, how they'd compare it to other products, and just let them have that conversation like amongst themselves. And especially if you start with like some of your own champions and stuff, and you use it as an opportunity for market research to make the products better, but then also just people connecting with other people. I think about that as a free offer. I think about, like I mentioned, the free tools. And we have something kind of like in between that might be interesting for people to consider. So for instance, like we just rolled out key play lists, right? And so it's a way to easily make an account list in like 90 seconds, right? Of like picking a few different filters, picking signals and all those things, and then be able to see kind of a preview of the quality. Sorry, there must be an Amazon guy on the house right now. and yeah, just like kind of experience like a mini version, you know, of the product, or like a small version of the product. But then ultimately, like ultimately you pay if you want the full list, right? Like if you want more than just like a sample of the list. And so that's not quite freemium. Like the experience to create a list and to kind of preview the product is the free portion of it, is like the free offer. But ultimately it's kind of like more of a self-serve, one-time thing that ultimately helps people, again, see a portion of the product and maybe be more interested in like the ongoing annual plans too. So I think of that as like a nice in between, if you can't, again, do like 100% free, or for us, it was kind of, I see it as like a stepping stone, like before we do like a full freemium offer as well. So I think about that. And then I talked about open source as well. So anytime, and I think templates kind of falls into this too, right? Like if it's, if you have a framework of some sort, then that helps your positioning of like, we know what we're doing here. Like we know what your workflow looks like, and we're going to help it make it better. And so being able to give people frameworks, give people kind of like plug and play how to get started. HubSpot, I think, is like one of the best early examples of this. They had all these like gated frameworks and checklists and things, right? But they also had like the funnel, right? I think they came up with like the ADA funnel, right? And so so they are known for that, and they are known for just like helping smaller businesses get started and kind of set themselves up as like the sales and marketing experts in that front. So anytime you can just help somebody get started or help people see value in their product faster, I consider that like a free offer of sorts, whether it's content or whether it's like product related.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. We also had another question come in, and I'd actually love to get your take on this. Can we spend a little bit more time on ICP? It feels like our ICP is everyone. How do we get both sales and marketing on the same page about the who?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, let me think about the best way to answer this. I'm trying to think in my experiences of like sales and marketing working on this together. There is always this disconnect. And so I think at first it's like understanding ownership of some sort. Like there has to be a company goal, right? To figure out ICP, to make that a priority, right? So it has to come from the top. And then it's a matter of sort of like who takes what. And so I've seen RevOps being usually like the most successful at being able to kind of like make ICP actionable, if you will. But I think that it needs to kind of start with a combination of founder, head of marketing, head of sales, like coming together and sort of like swapping information of like, here's what we're seeing on the sales side, like on the front lines. Here's what we're seeing on the marketing end, and vetting that information, like vetting that data, and then yeah, coming together to kind of like come up with the plan of the who. So without talking too much about like our own offering, a few things that our customers have done to kind of get at this is doing a like CRM analysis, right? And so we've helped with this with them when they onboard of, okay, where are you now? Like, what do you have? And it's either a combination or it's one or the other of like inbound or outbound, right? Like either you have a ton of inbounds coming in, but you have no idea how to like rank these leads or like score these leads, right? Like, and so being able to kind of like score all of those by account, and that's kind of what we do, right? Is like, okay, let's take a step back, forget about like the contacts at this point, like what accounts should you be targeting? And so we'll score all of the accounts in a CRM, and then they're able to kind of like do, or we're able to work with them on the analysis of like, do you have a bunch of D accounts in here? Do you have a bunch of like A+ accounts? And we talk to them about their criteria of where that sweet spot seems to be of when people close. So if you do a CRM analysis, you're able to kind of like see which accounts are most likely to close, right? Which ended up stalling, and you're able to kind of like see those trends, and then you're able to create a model around that. So then so then we like work with customers to sort of like create that model, and so that we can properly like score accounts and like see the consistency between accounts, and be able to start to replicate like the successes that you've had, right? And so that's worked really well for some. By if you just simplify it and think about A, B, C, D, like if you think about like what's an A account, what's a B account, and then once you get to that stage, you can say, okay, well, I want all of the A opportunities or A accounts to be assigned to senior AEs, right? And maybe I want all of the B and C accounts like to be assigned to BDRs, right? And so then you're able to kind of like, that's an overly simplified way of looking at it, but you can do that. And then you can also look at territories, right? Like if you're a more traditional company and maybe you have regions and territories, you're able to kind of break it down that way, like which companies are where, like how can we divide and conquer in a way that makes sense? But I see like everyone has a problem with either too few accounts or too many accounts, right? And so for us, it's either like we go in and help people make sense of the inbound motion, right? If you have PLG and you have a lot coming in, but you don't know how to kind of do like the sales side of that or how to sort of attack that, then there's that. And then there's the opposite problem with like new startups where it's like, I don't have anything, right? Like I don't have any leads right now. Like, how do I just get a list that makes sense? And how do I prioritize that list and prioritize certain accounts? And so I think it's figuring out which end of the spectrum that you're on, right? Like which problem that you have. And then coming together with your GTM team, basically sales, marketing, I think even CS too, because they're able to, I talk to CS all the time of like, which customers are the happiest, right? Like who's a great customer for us? And the founder, having them all together get on the same page. But ultimately you have to kind of know what those signals are. And it can be a trial and error. Like when we help create models for people, we're tweaking it like as we go, right? Because we're constantly like doing an analysis of like, are A accounts still A accounts? Like is your product now better suited for up market or going down market? Like what's happening and what's happening within those accounts? Because it's on the account side, it's like maybe sales tech and MarTech like is struggling right now. So what are other niches that you haven't been going after that you need to start think about pivoting to? You always need to be like one step ahead too. So it's what's your bread and butter, and then like how do you innovate? How do you kind of like add other markets in there or change your product a little bit to cater to the best fit accounts at that time?
Yeah. And I liked what you said, right? Because we do ICP workshops with our portfolio a lot, right? And we often do it with sales and marketing in conjunction, right? Because you do want them to be aligned and you want everyone to be on the page. And we have like an ICP framework where we break it down by like firmographic, environmental, behavioral factors, right? And then a big part of what you were saying that stuck out was also just leveraging data when you think of your ICP, right? So it's both quantitative, where you think of higher win rates and higher spend and lower churn and things like that, but then also qualitative, where you are, via interviews, we talk to CS and sales and product, and you kind of just bring that more holistic, data-driven approach to it. So no, I completely agree.
Yeah. And I mean, it's hard because it's a catch-22 and that you aren't totally going to have complete product market fit or like 100% know your ICP when you're a small startup, right? It's going to keep evolving and it's going to keep like changing, and you have limited data. Like this is one thing that came up when I hear about like the big ABM providers, is that they need a certain amount of data. And so they'll go when they're doing sort of like the free trial stage or whatever, they'll go and be like, oh, you don't have enough data. So like, we can't really help you as much. And so, so at that stage, I think is like where, is where it's like that internal look of like, what do we have, right? Is it, do we already have inbound leads? If not, like what does a good list look like for us? And it's going back to that quote from before of like 50% of sales is just like a solid account list, right? And so do like the unscalable things at first.
Yep. And then I really like the question that Nate threw in the chat. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it, but he said they're moving more towards a PLG motion, but there seems to be a fear that by doing the self-serve DIY offer, you're going to undercut your current business. I'm curious your take on that.
Yeah, so I think about, I know this was a while ago because this was like when no one was doing PLG, that MailChimp was doing PLG, and it was during a recession, that they were able to like take a lot of the market share, at least for that kind of like SMB, like email space, because like no one was buying right now or at that moment, but they were sort of like taking the bet on all of these small businesses like need an email provider, and if we can just be there for them right now, and like give away more for free than our competitors are doing, then we think that we can like own more of the market and like use this opportunity to like take over more of the market, and that turned out to be true. Like they're doing very well right now. And part of that is before everyone was doing PLG, and so Nate, like you probably have some like competitors that are also doing it. So I'd kind of like peek in on that and like a spy on that of like how they're doing it, and not just like your competitors, but what are companies that you admire and like how are they doing it well, right? Like that's kind of what I tend to look at, because I think when people look at lookalikes, they get too caught up in like, well, that wouldn't work for my industry, like that wouldn't work for like my niche, when it's really just like, but what can you take away from like what that company is doing well, like, and how can you apply it to your situation?
Yep.
So yeah, so I mean, I totally get the worry of trying to undercut your current like service or business, and so I think that that's when and we have like a pricing analysis, a pricing report that we did that might be useful to look at. I can send this to you afterwards, Nate, since I know you. But that kind of like goes into like, you need to find those triggers for people, like where it's worth the upgrade, right? So this is where I think like the reverse trial makes sense, where it's like show them everything. Like I think if you can make kind of a freemium tool and kind of like show them what great looks like, and then scale back to good, and it's like, okay, this is good, but I really wish that I could do these other things again. That's where like I think the reverse trial is really helpful in helping with this. But ultimately it's like, what are the features within your product that people are willing to pay for, right? When do they take the leap from kind of interested, like kind of curious, to yes, like I would pay for this? And that's really when you have like product market fit too. So understanding like what your product market fit is, where people are willing to pay for things, but also what would be like a good free tool to just kind of like get the spark, like get that kind of aha moment without 100% giving it to giving everything away, right?
Yep. No, that'll I mean, that's kind of what the reverse trial thing is something we've talked about so much with the try it before you buy it, right? And we've just found that it works so much better, and there are different ways based on your business to do that. But completely agree with that. Do we have any other questions from the group here? Camille and I can hang out for a couple more minutes if anything else comes up. If not, then I'm happy to give people some time back too. And I really, really appreciate all of you guys hopping on. Camille, thank you so much. This was truly awesome. It was great to hear some of what you guys are seeing in the market, and to have some time to talk through some of that. So I really appreciate the time that we spent here.
Yeah, it's been fun. Thanks y'all for joining in.